In the final years leading up to the Second World War, Germany was not only rebuilding its military strength, but also its scientific might. Deep inside underground laboratories and secret mountain facilities, a new generation of German scientists was working on machines that looked like they belonged to another century. To the outside world, Germany was arming itself for another land war. But within the heart of its industrial cities, something far more ambitious was taking shape, weapons that could change the very nature of warfare itself. By 1938, research centers scattered across the Reich were quietly recruiting the best engineers, mathematicians, and physicists from across Europe. Their mission was simple but terrifying: to create Wunderwaffe, or wonder weapons, that would give Germany an unstoppable edge in war. Many of these scientists were inspired by dreams of flight beyond the Earth, machines that could break the limits of human speed, and bombs that could level entire cities from the sky. As war erupted in 1939, these projects gained enormous funding. The Luftwaffe wanted faster planes, the Navy wanted silent submarines, and the Army dreamed of rockets that could reach across oceans. Factories in Pienemunde and the Harz Mountains became symbols of this secret war effort. Even as Germany's armies swept across Europe, another army of scientists was quietly fighting a different kind of battle, a race against time. One of the earliest successes of this effort was the Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. It could fly faster than any Allied aircraft and struck fear into enemy pilots. But production delays, lack of fuel, and the constant bombing of factories meant that only a few were ever completed in time. Still, when the Me-262 took off, it was like seeing the future, sleek, powerful, and unlike anything the world had witnessed. Meanwhile, far from the front lines, another dream was taking shape under the leadership of Wernher von Braun and his team. They were building something that seemed impossible, a rocket capable of crossing countries, delivering explosives without a pilot. The Allies would later know it as the V2 rocket, but at the time, it was top secret. Its prototype flights stunned German generals. A missile that could reach the edge of space before descending on its target at supersonic speed. Underground tunnels, hidden test ranges, and mountain bases became the heart of these experiments. Workers were brought in under strict secrecy. Many never returned. The Allies knew something was happening. They had reports of strange weapons, fiery lights in the sky, and massive explosions during test launches, but they couldn't yet understand the scale of what Germany was planning. By 1942, the war had turned global. While the Wehrmacht fought in the deserts of Africa and the snows of Russia, scientists back home were working day and night, racing to perfect these miracle weapons. Their goal was not just to win, it was to redefine what war meant. The Me-262 had proven that jets could dominate the sky. The V2 showed that missiles could strike unseen and unstoppable. And deeper in the underground chambers of secret bases, even stranger projects were whispered about. Circular aircraft that could hover, invisible jets, and energy weapons that defied explanation. Whether these were prototypes, myths, or early dreams of technologies yet to come, one thing was clear. Germany was no longer just fighting a war of men and machines. It was fighting for control of the future itself. As Allied bombers filled the skies and the world turned against them, these secret programs grew even more desperate, more daring, and more dangerous. The final years of the war would push science to its limits and beyond. As the war dragged deeper into chaos, Germany's dreams of quick victory vanished under the weight of Allied power. Cities were burning, factories bombed, and supply lines collapsing. Yet, inside the fortified research sites along the Baltic coast, a different kind of battle continued. A battle not fought with tanks and guns, but with formulas, blueprints, and engines that screamed of a future no one had yet imagined. The Allies had their spies, and they had heard rumors, strange rocket trails in the sky, sonic booms without aircraft, explosions that came from nowhere. But what they didn't know was that Germany was already testing the most advanced weapons the world had ever seen. The V-series, short for Vergeltungswaffen, meaning weapons of retaliation. The first of these, the V-1 flying bomb, looked like a small unmanned airplane with a pulse jet engine mounted on top. It was the world's first cruise missile, a terrifying mechanical bird that buzzed through the air with a chilling rhythmic hum. When that engine stopped, silence fell, and then came destruction. The V-1s were launched toward London and other Allied cities, spreading panic as they struck without warning. They weren't accurate, but they didn't need to be. They were a symbol, a message from a desperate regime that Germany could still strike back. But the true marvel of German engineering came with the V-2 rocket. Unlike the slow V-1, the V-2 flew faster than sound. It left the launch pad in a blinding blaze, soared into the upper atmosphere, and then came crashing down from the edge of space. There was no defense against it, no warning. One moment, the world was silent. The next, a city block vanished. This rocket, built under the direction of Werner von Braun and his team at Peenemünde, was a glimpse into the future of warfare. It used liquid fuel, advanced gyroscopic guidance, and a streamlined body that could withstand the heat of re-entry. In 1944, as Allied bombers pounded German soil, these rockets rose from hidden launch sites and rained fire on cities hundreds of kilometers away. The V-2 was more than a weapon. It was a technological revolution. It was the first human-made object to cross into space. In another time, it could have been a launch vehicle for satellites or space exploration. But in the darkness of war, it became a weapon of terror and a symbol of how science, when twisted by desperation, could reach unimaginable extremes. Every launch was a triumph of human ingenuity and tragedy intertwined. Thousands of workers, many forced laborers, died constructing the rockets in underground tunnels like Heidelberg, where the cold air was filled with dust and fear. Above ground, German engineers celebrated the technical success while the world trembled at what it meant. The Allies tried desperately to find and destroy the launch sites. Reconnaissance planes photographed strange concrete ramps hidden in forests and along coastlines. Commanders ordered bombings, but the sites were mobile and well camouflaged. For months, no one could stop the missiles. London, Antwerp, and Paris suffered in silence as the invisible enemy struck from the skies. But even as the V-weapons terrified the world, they came too late. By 1944, Germany was losing on all fronts. Fuel shortages crippled the program, resources were drained, and Allied advances pushed research facilities farther underground. Yet the work continued. Some scientists began dreaming even bigger, long-range missiles that could reach across the Atlantic, or aircraft that could fly beyond the stratosphere and return untouched. The war was collapsing, but ambition refused to die. In secret meetings, German engineers spoke of a new weapon, a space bomber that could strike any city on Earth from orbit. It was never built, but the plans existed. Drawings of flying discs, advanced propulsion systems, and supersonic aircraft littered the laboratories as the Reich fell apart around them. Whether they were realistic or pure fantasy, these concepts showed the same obsession that drove every part of Germany's secret weapons project: the desire to achieve the impossible. By the end of 1944, the V-weapons program had achieved what no one thought possible. It had broken the boundaries of Earth's atmosphere. But it couldn't save the war. Each rocket that soared into the sky carried with it not just destruction, but a piece of a dream that was both brilliant and horrifying. As the Allies closed in, scientists burned documents, hid equipment, and prepared to surrender. They knew their work would not end with defeat. It would simply change hands. The technology born in these dark laboratories would go on to shape the future, from missiles to space exploration. But in that moment, under the roar of the last rockets, no one could see the future clearly, only the fire raining down from the sky. As the war entered its final years, Germany's skies were filled not just with bombers and fighters, but with dreams, dreams of flight beyond the limits of the human imagination. Deep in underground hangars, inside mountain bases and secret airfields, engineers were sketching shapes no one had ever seen before. Flying wings, rocket-powered interceptors, jet engines, and even saucer-like aircraft that seemed to defy gravity. The German Air Ministry called them Projekt Flugzeug, Project Aircraft. Their goal was simple but audacious: build machines that could regain air superiority and perhaps even change the course of the war. These aircraft would be faster, higher, and deadlier than anything the Allies had. The Messerschmitt Me. 262 was the first glimpse of that future. With its twin jet engines and sleek body, it could outrun every Allied fighter by hundreds of kilometers per hour. Allied pilots who encountered it for the first time described it as a silver flash that vanished before we could react. The Me-262 could have changed everything, if only it had arrived earlier. Delays, political interference, and the crumbling state of Germany's industry meant only a few hundred were ever built. Still, every time one took to the air, it reminded the world that Germany's engineers were years ahead in technology. Then came the Heinkel He-162, nicknamed the Volksjäger, or People's Fighter. It was small, fast, and designed to be built quickly from cheap materials. The idea was desperate: a jet that could be flown by young, barely trained pilots. It flew, it fought, and it crashed. The war had become too chaotic for even the most advanced designs to make a difference. But it wasn't just jets. The scientists were exploring ideas that still sound futuristic today. One such project was the Horten Ho 229, a flying wing aircraft designed by the Horten brothers. It looked like something from another world, smooth, curved, and built with stealth in mind. Decades later, engineers studying the surviving remains of the Ho 229 would realize it was one of the world's first attempts at a radar-evading aircraft. Its shape and materials were designed to reduce detection, a concept that wouldn't become common until the late 20th century. Alongside the Hortens, another project took shape: the Messerschmitt P1101, a jet whose wings could change angle in flight, the first prototype of what would later become the variable sweep wing, a technology used by advanced fighters like the F-14 Tomcat decades later. The German engineers didn't just imagine the future, they built its foundations. In hidden mountain factories, designers experimented with vertical takeoff aircraft, rocket-propelled interceptors, and even disc-shaped prototypes that tested new aerodynamic ideas. The Bachem Ba 349 Natter, for example, was a rocket-powered interceptor meant to shoot into the air vertically, fire its rockets at bombers, and then have the pilot eject. It was suicide-level dangerous, but it showed how far the desperation for innovation had gone. Rumors began to spread among Allied intelligence of mysterious aircraft and circular flying objects seen near test sites. Some reports were exaggerated, others misinterpreted, but they all pointed to one truth: Germany was experimenting with things no one else dared to imagine. The war had become a laboratory of extremes, and science was no longer bound by limits of reason or safety. Behind these projects was a mix of genius and despair. Engineers worked in freezing tunnels, using scavenged materials and improvised machines. Test pilots risked their lives flying prototypes that were unstable, untested, and often deadly. Every flight could be the last. Yet even amid collapse, the German scientists continued to push boundaries that would later define the modern world. When Allied troops captured German airfields in 1945, they found hangars filled with aircraft that looked like science fiction: delta wings, jet bombers, flying wings, and sketches of supersonic planes. Some designs were only paper drawings, others were partially built, and a few had already flown. The Allied scientists who saw them were stunned. Many of these designs would later inspire post-war aircraft in both the East and West. The jet engine, the swept wing, the flying wing, all were legacies of these desperate final years. The war had forced innovation at an unnatural pace, and though Germany lost, its research reshaped aviation forever. As the war neared its end, the sky was filled not just with the thunder of bombers, but with ghosts of what could have been, machines that might have changed the world if history had given them time. The dream of air supremacy had driven Germany's scientists to the edge of possibility, but even as their technology reached the skies, the empire beneath them was burning. As the war raged into its final desperate phase, Germany's scientists turned their eyes toward a power that even they scarcely understood, a force capable of destroying entire cities with a single blast. This was not just another weapon of war. It was the ultimate secret. Deep beneath mountains and inside fortified research facilities, the quest for atomic energy had quietly begun. By 1942, both the Allies and the Axis had realized that nuclear fission, the splitting of the atom, held unimaginable potential. But while the Allies poured massive resources into what would become the Manhattan Project, Germany's efforts were scattered, underfunded, and buried beneath the chaos of war. Still, what the German scientists lacked in resources, they made up for in ambition. At laboratories in Leipzig, Berlin, and Vienna, physicists worked with crude reactors made of uranium cubes and heavy water, trying to reach a sustained chain reaction. Their goal was twofold: harness nuclear energy for power, and if possible, weaponize it. They called it the Urine Project, the Uranium Project, a program cloaked in secrecy even from many within the military. The leading minds behind this effort, brilliant physicists, mathematicians, and engineers, dreamed of creating what they called the super bomb. They believed that by compressing atomic material in just the right way, they could unleash an explosion far greater than anything mankind had ever seen. But Germany's war machine was already running out of everything: time, materials, and manpower. Factories that once produced steel and fuel were now rubble. Allied bombers had reduced entire cities to ashes, and while scientists experimented with crude reactors, the rest of the country was collapsing. Yet even then, strange shipments of uranium ore and heavy water continued to move quietly across occupied Europe, bound for underground laboratories. In Norway, the Allies launched daring raids to destroy a facility producing heavy water, a key component for nuclear research. They succeeded, a devastating blow that slowed Germany's progress even further. But by then, rumors had already begun to spread among Allied intelligence that Germany was close, dangerously close, to a working atomic device. Whether that was true or not, the fear alone was enough to push the Allies into overdrive. Meanwhile, inside Germany, another idea was taking form: the super cannon, officially known as the WW2. Unlike the V1 or V2 rockets, this massive weapon used a long, multi-chambered barrel to fire projectiles at extreme velocity. It was intended to bombard London from across the English Channel. Tests were made, prototypes built. But like so many of Germany's wonder weapons, the V3 came too late and too flawed to make any real difference. And yet, the ambition didn't stop. Engineers proposed even greater ideas: suborbital rockets that could strike from the edge of space, nuclear-powered aircraft, and energy weapons that sounded like science fiction. Some projects existed only on paper. Others reached the prototype stage before being buried under the ruins of war. The belief that technology could reverse defeat had become a kind of obsession. As Germany crumbled, the race for these secrets intensified. Both the Allies and the Soviets knew that whoever captured the scientists and their work would inherit the future. Intelligence teams were sent into the chaos, scouring laboratories, intercepting trains, and interrogating engineers. They called it Operation Paperclip in the West, and Operation Osawaviakum in the east. It was not just a race for victory anymore. It was a race for knowledge. When Allied forces finally reached the underground complexes, what they found was both extraordinary and terrifying. Tunnels lined with machinery, half-finished experiments, and stacks of blueprints describing technologies decades ahead of their time. In one mountain facility, barrels of uranium sat untouched. In another, a half-built nuclear reactor stood silent, its core dismantled to prevent capture. Historians still debate how close Germany actually came to building a nuclear bomb. Some say they were years away. Others believe they might have been months from a breakthrough had circumstances been different. What is certain is that their research laid foundations that the world would soon build upon, for both war and peace. When the war finally ended, the scientists who once served the Reich were scattered across the world. Some went to America, others to the Soviet Union. Their knowledge became the backbone of the early space race and the nuclear age that followed. In the end, Germany's dream of ultimate power remained just that, a dream. The same brilliance that had created the jet engine, the rocket, and the flying wing could not save a nation collapsing under its own weight. Yet, in a strange way, their vision survived. It lived on in the missiles that would later reach the stars and in the energy that would power a new world. A world forever changed by the secrets born in the darkest days of the war. The guns of war finally fell silent in 1945. Cities lay in ruins, armies surrendered, and the world began to take its first fragile breath of peace. But even as the smoke cleared, another race had already begun, not for territory or power, but for the secrets that had fueled Germany's scientific revolution. The Allies had learned of Germany's Wunderweapons, but few truly understood how advanced they were until they stepped inside the underground factories and mountain tunnels that had powered the Reich's secret war. What they found inside those silent halls would change the world forever. In Peenemünde, they discovered the remains of the V2 rocket program, blueprints, engines, and testing logs that looked like something from the future. For the first time, mankind had reached the edge of space. That technology didn't vanish with defeat, it was reborn. Within just a few years, the same designs that had once been used to strike European cities would help launch satellites, missiles, and even humans beyond Earth. The man who had once led the V2 program, Wernher von Braun, would go on to help build the rockets that sent humans to the moon. The irony was undeniable. Technology born in war would now carry mankind into the stars. But this transformation didn't happen by chance. It happened because both superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, understood that whoever controlled German science would control the future. Operation Paperclip, a top-secret American program, brought hundreds of German scientists, engineers, and technicians to the United States. There, they worked on advanced aviation, missile technology, and nuclear research. The Soviets did the same, taking equipment, documents, and scientists eastward under Operation Osawaviakim. For years after the war, nations quietly built upon Germany's wartime discoveries. Jet aircraft evolved from prototypes like the Me-262 and the Horton Ho 229. The ideas, once sketched in secret bunkers, became the foundation of modern aerospace engineering. Even stealth technology, supersonic flight, and guided missiles owed their existence to concepts born in those desperate final years. Yet, behind this technological triumph was a shadow that never disappeared: the cost. Thousands had perished building these weapons underground. Entire cities were destroyed by the very machines designed to bring victory through science. The world entered the Cold War carrying not just knowledge, but the burden of what that knowledge could do. In the 1950s and 60s, as rockets climbed into the sky and the first satellites began orbiting Earth, few remembered where it all began. In the 1950s and 60s, laboratories of a broken empire. The sleek space capsules and modern jets were descendants of the same designs once hidden beneath the German mountains. The dream of flight without limits, of machines faster than sound, had survived the ruins of war. Historians would later call it one of the greatest ironies of the 20th century. The very weapons created to destroy the world had, in their evolution, helped humanity explore it. The V-2 became the ancestor of the space rocket. The jet fighter became the model for global air travel. Even nuclear research, once aimed at domination, became a source of power that lit cities instead of destroying them. But some mysteries never faded. Decades after the war, reports still surfaced of lost prototypes, hidden bunkers, and unexplained technologies buried deep beneath the soil of Europe. Some believed there were still designs undiscovered, aircraft far ahead of their time, experimental energy devices, or secret archives destroyed before the surrender. Whether myth or truth, these stories kept the legend of Germany's Wunderwaffe alive, a ghost from a war that refused to fade. In the end, the legacy of Germany's secret weapons is one of contradiction. They were born from destruction, yet they became the foundation of progress. They symbolized both human genius and human madness, the endless drive to create, no matter the cost. The war ended, but its science never did. The inventions born in hidden tunnels and under the roar of jet engines went on to shape the modern world, from the missiles that guard nations to the spacecraft that carry explorers beyond the stars. And so, the story of Germany's secret weapons isn't just about war. It's about what happens when ambition meets desperation, when science becomes both a sword and a promise. From the ashes of defeat rose a new era of technology, one that would forever change the destiny of mankind.